Hello, I'm Dmitry Sitkovetsky, and this is Q&A with Dima. The program is called Transformation, the Art of Reinvention in the Time of the Pandemic. What I have is very, very special treat. I've got two outstanding brothers, two fantastic violists, and also the heads of an incredible clan of violists, which we will talk about. They count no less than 7 violists among their means. I think it's the only family that I know that has quite that number. Anyway, welcome to Mikhail and Alexander Zemtsov. Welcome to the program, guys.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Yeah, great to see. Of course, I know them since 20 years, so I will be, they can call me Dima, and I will be calling Alexander Sasha and Mikhail Misha, if you allow me, because we never call each other with the full name. Anyway, speaking of meeting, for the first time, we met, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm pretty sure I'm correct because I looked it up. We met in November 2000 in a lovely town of the former and still is Norwegian oil boom, which happened in Stavanger. And you were doing a viola boom at that time in Stavanger. I came there to conduct, and there they were. Misha, the older brother, was the principal violist, and Sasha, who was not even 20, he must have been, I don't know, very, very young, but still in his late teens. He was also in the viola section. So what I'd like to do now is ask you, actually, where have you been up until Stavanger? Because after that, we became good friends, and I know your life more or less. But before, I really don't know. So Misha, you start, because you started earlier. You were born earlier.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So I'll try to tell quickly the history of our family. Our mother, Lyudmila Levinson, and our father, they both, Evgeny Zemtsov, they both studied in Moscow, and they met in Moscow. Originally, my mother is from Grozny, from Chechnya, and my father was born in Raskazo, in Tambov, near Tambov. It's old Russian city. So, and then they met in Moscow, and then they got married. They finished the conservatory. My father the conservatory, and my mother the Gnesin Institute. And then they moved to Ulyanovsk. That was the famous thing, распределение, which people from other countries don't know. But it's actually in Russia, in the Soviet Union, you was studying for free, but then you had to, you would be sent somewhere by the government, and there was practically no way, unless you had very powerful friends somewhere in the Communist Party, you was sent probably to the very far place in the country. So my parents were sent to Ulyanovsk. That's not so far. It's maybe about 600 kilometers from Russia, or 1,000 kilometers, which from Russia, for Russia, is very close. And there was a new Philharmonic Orchestra created for some anniversary of the birth of Lenin. And the Soviet Union, many things were happening on the anniversaries of birth of Lenin, or revolution anniversary, and so on. So this new Philharmonic Orchestra, my mom was a viola player in this orchestra, and my father teached there in the music college. So then to make the story a little shorter, they moved finally to Ufa, to Ural Mountains, where Sasha was born. And my father was teaching in the Arts Institute, Institute Искусств in Ufa, which was actually a very good institution with a high level. I think about 80-90% of the teachers finished Moscow conservatory or Gnes Institute. So that was the actually this распределение, this sending people through the whole country. It had positive sides actually for the country, because you nowadays still you can go to somewhere to Far East, Khabarovsk or Vladivostok, wherever, and you will meet very good musicians. So Dima maybe knows this very well.
Of course, and that's how we have, they have wonderful conservatories in faraway places like Novosibirsk, for
Yeah,
instance.
yeah.
But that's Siberia and so forth. But that was actually one of the most progressive things. I mean, of course, if you happen to be the one that was sent God knows where, and you grew up in Moscow, you were not very happy. But for the distribution, for the education, and for the boost of music in the places, to have those highly qualified graduates from Moscow, from Leningrad at that time, or Kiev or Baku or whatever. Yeah, it was a great system of sending the specialists, so to speak. Yeah, and it was. But of course, as everything with human beings, it depended very much on your personal connections, and if you had somebody who could put so you were born in Ulyanovsk, Misha, or
Yes, I was born in Ulyanovsk, but I in Ulyanovsk it was at that time it was quite a poor city, so there was no much food. So and I got very ill after a year, and then my parents sent me to Grozny to my grandparents,
wow.
and Grozny Caucasus. It was phenomenal place at that time. It was hardly, you could hardly call it Soviet Union, because there was everything. There was black market. People were doing things and living actually very well.
Yeah, lots of fruit and vegetables and
Yes, yes.
food and the flowers, and it's a very rich region. Used to be. Now, of course, it's very, very different.
Yeah, there was a terrible war there. That's
Yeah,
yeah.
but that
But
that, that happened later. And Sasha, you were how long were you? So you were born in Ufa. I
Yeah,
think, as far as I know, Vladimir Spivakov was also born in Ufa, so it has a certain string distinction. What do you remember about Ufa? Were you were too young to?
no, I went to school there until I was 10 years old.
Wow, so you lived 10 years in Ufa.
And I still keep in touch with my friends from Ufa. It was a nice place, especially when you don't know what is around. For me, for example, when I first went to Moscow, it was like going on a different planet. And then when I entered the Gnesian school, I just thought there is no pupils. They're all kind of half gods. Also, the playing level was, of course, incredible, and that was a huge step for me. And I still don't know how my mother managed this move. Yeah, and the thing is that when we moved, before we moved to Moscow, Misha was studying in Central Music School. So I didn't see Misha since his age of 13 and my age of 4. So, and then when we came to Moscow, Misha immigrated to Mexico. So the real time when we started to really become connected
Family
to each other
again.
was Stavanger. That was the
Really, that was the first place. And how did you get into Stavanger? Both of you, Misha first. So let's skip that part and go to Mexico for just a little bit. How come you went to Mexico from Moscow or
yes.
from another place?
Um, so we had, as Sasha says, so I went when I was 13. I went to the Central Music School. This is another fantastic thing about Russia, because both Sasha and me, still in Ufa, we were studying in this special school where both the normal subjects and musical subjects were taught.
Together.
And so after that I started with Galina Adinets, and she also taught in the conservatory, so I went also to the conservatory in the same class. And then I met Yulia, my wife. I met her in the conservatory, And then we had a very, very good friend who was a double bass player from Mexico, Alicia Gandara. Hopefully she is watching us today, or she will watch this interview. So, and when we both had neighbors, me and Yulia, from Latin countries, and we started learning Spanish like a game, you know. But then in a certain time, in a year, we already sort of started speaking Spanish. And this poor girl, which came from Mexico, 18 years old girl, which came from to Moscow completely alone in this terrible winter, and I remember the first time I met her, she was just sitting in her room and basically crying, and we were trying to translate for her something, you know. So we helped her as much as we could, but then she was also after a while she was sent to Minsk, to the city where Yulia, my wife, is from, and her parents lived in Minsk. And this girl, she became sort of adopted daughter of them, so she lived in their house and so on. And then when she was leaving to Mexico, she said, "I really would like very much to invite you to Mexico." And they said, "Yes, thank you very much," but they didn't think seriously about that. But then there was perestroika. Then all the country started just falling apart, and they also had two younger brothers of Julia who supposedly would have to go to military service, and there was Chernobyl and Afghanistan, whatever, you know, all this story. You know, so they were quite afraid, and we all first got an invitation from Israel. So we could immigrate to Israel. We had this possibility, but that was exactly the year in 89 and 90, where 200,000 people a year were coming to Israel. And our aunts, they went there, the sisters of our mother, and they told us, "You better find another place, because here now there's not a moment to come to these countries, too crowded." And then, so it was very difficult to convince Yulia's parents to go to Mexico, but finally we managed to do that. We managed somehow to buy the tickets, which was, you know, it was a terrible thing. Thanks to the tours of the conservatory orchestras, we could save some money, and then so hard currency, and you know, that was the way for the people to survive, those who had the chance to get out, to go to abroad. So we just actually we didn't finish the conservatory. We were on the fourth year, and we didn't really plan to stay in Mexico. We just thought we would help our Yulia's parents and her brothers to stay there, and we would come back to finish the conservatory. So we came to Mexico City. We stayed in the house of Alicia, and a couple of days later she took us to she just called National Symphony Orchestra, and she made an appointment. We came to meet Enrique Dimeque, the quite famous conductor. He's now a chief in the Colón Theater in Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
So we made this appointment, and he said, "Okay, in 5 days you can play an audition for me, and then let's see." So it was like, okay, I also need to play audition. Great, but I don't have viola with me. So we started searching for some friends of anybody who could lend me a viola. So in the 2 days, I got a viola. And meanwhile, Yulia and her parents, all three of them are violinists. They had one violin. So they were practicing this one violin, you know. And then we came. Also, the problem was I didn't have any music with me. So, but I knew by heart 2 pieces by Sulhan Tsentzadze,
Wow,
Harumi and Romance. And these 2 pieces I played in my first audition, and we got the temporary contracts. You know?
Yeah,
So after a week of being in Mexico, we suddenly saw ourselves sitting in the National Orchestra and trying to play 8th Symphony by Mahler.
wow.
without any experience in orchestra. That was the most terrible thing, because you just sort of sit there and you have no idea what's going on. You just don't dare play a note. That's more or less.
You were not terribly exposed because there were, it's called the Symphony of Thousands. So there were a lot of people besides you there.
Yes, you're fighting together with that.
Yeah. At least so. And then while you were in Mexico, Sasha was still in Ufa, or
No,
no? You were in Moscow already.
Moscow.
In
Moscow.
Moscow. In Moscow. You were in Moscow, and you had no. How did you end up in Norway? Because I understand that after Mexico, Misha came to work. How did you meet? Now, Sasha, tell us how Stavanger became the meeting point for you reuniting Zemtsovs.
Yeah, so of course, because of all this kind of military service and all this chaos in ex-Soviet Union, Misha couldn't come to visit. So there was 7 years we didn't see each other.
Yeah.
Next time, I think we met in the airport. Was it Berlin or Hamburg, when we already moved to Germany? Because after I finished nursing school, my parents reapplied for immigration. So first one was Israel, which they refused, and the
Uh-huh.
second one,
They
they
refused.
wished very much to immigrate to Germany. So I entered Hamburg Hochschule, and I think that was when we met with Misha. And Misha, tell me, what you came to Germany just to see us, or was it already to do with Stavanger? This I can't remember.
No. I came with a Mexico City Quartet. I was a member of Mexico City Quartet, and we had a tour in Europe, and it was 97 maybe. I think it was 97, and you just moved from Schwerin to Hamburg, and we finally met after 6 years. Yeah, almost 7 years.
And
And
I mean, taking in consideration that we didn't really see each other as long we were living in Russia. Misha was just coming in the summer. Mama was finding cigarettes in his luggage and all that stuff. You know, the usual teenager come back. For me, it was so exciting. You know, all this stuff. You know, she found cigarettes. She made a scandal. I thought it's so exciting.
really,
I was very bad example.
well. I think on the contrary, in retrospect, you were a very good example how you could go to completely unknown country that you didn't even think that you would take roots in, like Mexico. You came without a viola, and you and Yulia, wonderful uh, violist in her own right and fantastic teacher now. So we have a double viola act just in your family. And before we start talking about the kids, but I mean, and get a immediately into the best orchestra in Mexico after playing Sulhans and Sadze, two pieces that you knew from memory. That makes a wonderful story. I mean, that you could make a TV series just of Zemtsov brothers travel. But in the meantime, what was Sasha's first impression when you came? You came to Germany first, right?
I mean, you know, I went with first time I was abroad. It was with the school orchestra, with the Gneissian School Orchestra, and we went to a festival in Paris, and that was I was 13, so that was kind of really impressive for me. And that time I decided that I don't want to live in Soviet Union anymore. I'm really this is something what excites me and all that. Of course, like in the famous joke that there's a difference between the tourism and immigration, those who know. And once we came to Germany, of course, it was kind of at some point a big shock because nobody of us really spoke German. But then assimilation came very quickly, and for me the question about the job was a little bit kind of a very early alarm because I had a son very early. So with 18 I was a father, and
Yeah.
so I had to find a job. But I did send. I remember I spent 120 marks to send applications to the orchestras, and I got 20 times no and 100 times nothing. So so and then I was kind of in the thoughts what to do. And one friend of mine told, "Look, your brother plays in Stavanger. You should do something. Ask him." So, and that's how it all started. And actually, in that time, Misha's colleague, because I think in Stavanger were two equal solo violas who swapped all the time. So she went into maternity leave.
Maternity leave. Yeah. So there was a place. Yeah.
Exactly. So there was a
Temporary.
place for 1 year, for which I came, played the audition, and won the audition. Then I was on trial, which was kind of couple of weeks, where I played a bunch of Norwegian modern music, and they kindly offered me to be in the tutti, which was a great thing. But the thing is that I still look back and I think how could I with 19 or just turning 20 win that kind of tricky audition, and that maybe there is some kind of advantage that we didn't see each other with Misha so long, because Misha became for me kind of a mentor who just explained me how this thing goes. He prepared me. He listened to me when I came to Stavanger. He listened to me every morning before the rehearsal. I had to pull off all the program at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and that made me a good stamina. And also, of course, I had no clue about orchestral excerpts. This
Of
was all
course.
explained by Misha.
All first. Yeah.
And
First time.
Misha was trembling behind the screen because 3 rounds were screened. Only fourth round they opened, and he
3 rounds behind the screen. That's I never heard of this. Must be Norwegian special. Yeah, three. They really don't want to see who's playing. It.
And he said that there was some couple of other viola players who sounded very good, but they started to do some mistakes, and Misha started, and I played last. So at every player, Misha was no, no. So, and then they opened the curtain, and I played the rest of the program, and that of course was for me a fantastic start in the orchestral career, because without this step and also without this unsuccessful trial, I would not go so far, because I learned so much in these weeks with this modern Norwegian ballet. I still remember some places the trumpet played the 16 notes and viola had to play every 8/16, so syncopated. I still
Wow,
remember,
that's
I still
quite.
count it. Misha taught me how to count it, because I thought the conductor will show us where to play with the left hand. Misha said, no.
Проверяй, но проверяй. Yeah, you can trust, but you check, as somebody said. Rather, no, this is you can never rely on the conductor. It's a nice surprise when he actually gives you something, but you should always rely later on. It's so interesting how you cut your teeth as a fabulous both of you fantastic and very successful of course principal violists, but I didn't realize that Stavanger was actually the sort of your university, in a way, your working university. That's why you but Misha, of course, was before he was prepared by Mexico.
Yeah.
Very interesting, because my impression is, as you said the other day, that Misha, of course, and we started speaking Russian, and I visited him, and I realized that you were very quiet. You were very young, 19. You must have been 19 at that time or something, yeah, or just 20. I don't know. Yeah. So, but you played very well, but you hardly said anything, and you looked with those big eyes. And it's because we had Dochnani Serenade on the program, which is not a walk in the park, and the orchestra was sweating bullets at some point in the scherzo, but you did very well. And then, of course, it's not that the rest is history. The rest is very interesting and different history. But then the next thing, I asked Misha to give me a call if he comes to London, and tell me you called me because you came for an audition at LPO, right?
Yes, actually, when I went for the audition, it was just one day I could fly in and out. But then LPO invited me for a trial. It was a principal place, and then I stayed longer in London, and then I called you.
Yes, and that's when we got together. And so you were on trial, and then when they were about to make a decision, you had another offer from The Hague, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So I had for half a year I had sort of I was traveling between Norway and London. It was very very interesting experience, of course. But London is a tough city, I must say. It's
Yes, especially for orchestral musicians, because
yes,
they just have to, do so much work in order to maintain, in order to pay the rent and to be able to live in this town. And some live very far because it's cheaper outside, but then
yeah.
there's
But all these distances is crazy. I remember living in Gypsy Hill and recording in Walthamstow studios. So and you make two hours actually if everything goes well. Yes, yeah.
if you don't get stuck in traffic, or if all the trains run on time, which is not a given, as we know.
Absolutely.
Oh boy, yeah. So you decided to take the Hague job, and since then you've been in the Hague with your family, and that's where you had two beautiful daughters. But in your place came the youngest, as it turned out, the youngest principal violist in I think LPO history, 23-year-old Alexander Zemtsov. So they lost one Zemtsov, but they gained another Zemtsov.
Better, newer one, new model.
Newer one. So how did that happen, Sash? You were already in Komishoper in the meantime.
Yes, during this 1 year contract in Stavanger, I started again. Soon it finishes, and the job question was again open. And actually, it was the first audition after Stavanger. I went to Berlin and played there. And got this contract. It was a kind of co-principal viola, yeah, stellvertretender Stimmführer, which was absolutely the right thing for me. After doing the tutti job and then sitting with I had fantastic first viola from whom I learned a lot. We sat together 3 years. He didn't play one mistake. I don't know how it's possible. And he knew all Strauss operas by memory. He knew all Wagner. He played every summer in Bayreuth. Eberhard Wünsch is his name. He just now went into pension. Never aimed for career. Was top viola player, and this kind of the highest of German, um, um, orchestral musician with mission, orchestral
Yeah.
musician with mission, who
Mission,
knows
yeah.
much more and dedicates himself much more than the job requires. So and then I was actually quite happy in that job because I had to work a little bit less than the tutti. The opera was amazing because once you learned it, you play it many times. So then you don't rehearse. So and then it's evening, always busy. The mornings you can do whatever. As a young guy, it was amazing.
Berlin. It's really
Berlin was
very
I
exciting.
was in love with Berlin. It was fantastic town. Yeah, but Misha didn't give me this piece, and he started to say, "Look, they opened the place again. You have to prepare." And for me, it was total nonsense because I know how much more experienced Misha is, and if he didn't get through this job, how can I? But sometimes things are very very different, and maybe because also Misha already introduced to me all the pros and cons. He was already an insider.
Of course.
His introduction to LPO from him was something what I would never get. So I mean, it's we can say we got it with Misha together.
Yes, collective effort.
That's extraordinary. We have, yeah, it was somebody that you might know, Maria Prince. So interesting. I'm enjoying this very much. So this is somebody that you probably know. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm just looking for. I'm looking at for whatever questions they might be, because I have a whole list of questions. But you wanted to say something about
yes,
Maria?
yes, she's a wonderful pianist. She
Oh,
was she was married to the first clarinetist of Vienna Philharmonic, who
oh yeah.
unfortunately passed away, Alfred Prinz. and she is a chamber music partner and accompanist of the top clarinet classes in the Hochschule in Vienna. Very close friend of me, of Denitsa especially, because she's a Bulgarian from.
Denitsa Lavcheva, of course, a wonderful clarinetist who you met in London. But then now you moved. But that we'll get to
Yeah,
it, because there's a lot of chapters in your
I'm really
life
glad that she's.
that if we go through just your life, we'll have at least 3 hour talk. But let's keep sort of the highlights. Yeah. Now, now Misha settled in The Hague, and of course now we started seeing each other because I would bring you to, from 2000. I looked up from 2002. I think Sasha was actually the first one in NAS, and then from 2003 Misha, and Misha's been many times with NAS, and Sasha's now rejoined in this whole NAS virtual, in this extraordinary crazy year that we're still living in, but now it's a little bit more going on, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other before too long, and to see each other making live music. But let me just switch the gears from the life story. In the last year that we've all experienced, you've never really, because one of the questions reads, you probably never spent as much time at home as in 2020. What new have you learned about yourself during the pandemic? What has been a positive lesson from being at home? And of course, coming, that question to you both, who already, for the listeners who've been following your travels from Ulyanovsk to Ufa to Moscow to Mexico City to Stavanger to London, and then we skip, of course, Germany and Berlin, and later on Sasha went also to Lausanne, and then Vienna and Cologne. So there's so many. You lead a very nomadic life, like I do, even though I've lived in London now for many years, but I've always on the road. But all of that came to stop in March 2020, and it gave us a chance to stay more with the family. Let's start with Misha. What are your thoughts? Did you have any kind of contemplation? What have you taken as a result of this, more time for thinking, more time with the family, and so forth?
Yes, yeah, I still remember this day, 13th of March of 2020, when I was working in here in the teaching in the conservatory in The Hague, and suddenly they just called on the radio that we all must leave the building and that the conservatories will close. You know, the thing is that I have a certain, maybe I would call it maybe a problem. You know, I cannot limit myself. I like so many things. You know, if I have 26 students. I was playing literally every weekend. I would play some concert, either a recital or chamber music, or I would travel somewhere. You know, and and also, of course, I'm also conduct a youth orchestra in Rotterdam, Young Talent Orchestra, and there is also a lot of work, organizatory work, and of course rehearsing and so on. And at certain moment, I had just, if I think about half year before the pandemic, I had sometimes a feeling that my head is like a pressure pan, you know, like those ones, you know, which they're
Pressure
closed.
cooker.
Yeah,
Pressure cooker, they say. Yeah,
pressure
yes.
cooker,
It's
yes,
like,
yeah. So that is get like, and I'm happy it didn't explode. It could happen at any moment. And you have so many projects together. As you know, I quit the orchestra in 2015, thinking that I will have more time.
yeah.
But since that moment, I had less and less free time. Because now, when you are freelancer, of course, you can do everything you want, you know. And the last time before pandemics, I was feeling this, that I'm not able to organize my life the way that I also could have at least not one day, half a day in a week free or whatever. And my wife Julia Dinerstein, she has absolutely the same you can call it happiness or problem. It's at the same time. It's two things. And then when this pandemic
But the way
came,
you wired, you
yes,
needed, yeah. Hmm.
you know,
The drive.
on one side, I'm really we all hear all these terrible stories about the people getting sick, getting really terrible illness, getting into the intensive care and so on. But for me, I'm a little bit ashamed telling that, but for me it was actually one of the best times in my life. Because first of all, we were at home together with my wife, and we were eating 3 times together. It never happened before, never. You see, we were still working, of course. All the rest of the day, we were teaching online or making projects as well. A lot of streams and recordings and as of course started already in the summer. We were doing our projects. You see, but that was really amazing time for us and for me personally, because I suddenly had time to do things which I dreamt of but never had the chance. I would never have a chance for this. Like some stupid things like practicing piano, for example. I really dreamt about a little bit, half an hour a day, a little bit. I really love playing piano, but I can't do it. you know. So this kind of luxuries, or reading books, or listening to some pieces of some lectures, or to sit down and listen to whole Mahler symphony. You know, that
Without
didn't happen.
interruption. Without interruption, yeah.
So just sitting there and listening to 1 hour to Mahler, so this kind of things, and I must say it was a very special time, and I did I finished, for example, some piece which I
All of a sudden, I think Misha
Yeah, Misha.
got
10 years ago, but I didn't have a chance to write it down, no time. But now it was possible, this kind of things.
so it's been a positive slowing down for you. And what about you, Sash?
Look, I mean, the of course this stop was very hard, but what came later is I'm very grateful to all this time. I mean, also very similar like Misha. I will not repeat. I mean, things which you always dreamt to do, and the contact with the family, the contact with relatives. I actually made this kind of group online where we connected all the relatives in all the countries, and we chat there and we speak there and we video call there.
Great.
Also, contact with the friends with whom I really appreciate. I mean, contact with you also. We didn't contact so much as we contact now
In the
because
last year,
there is
absolutely.
time, there is need, and all that. Also, the amount of reading I did, the how you know that I'm last 5 6 years I'm conducting, and you always kind of dream, oh, I would take this time for myself and look through the scores, improve the score reading, analyze things like really calmly. And this is very nice fairy tale
Yeah,
until
of
someone
course.
tells you just sit at home. And when you sit at home, you actually have time for all those things. And I mean the contact with my son, with my little son, uh, Alexis. Uh, it's really something what makes now huge part of my life. Before I loved him, of course, I loved him from the day one of his
Of course.
birth.
Of
But
course.
there's one love when you fly around the world and you love him by the phone and all that, and the other way when you spend hours and hours on bicycles in the forest reading, not only books, also he's very good now with sight reading. I would never find out that he has this talent. I would never find out that he has actually talent for music in such a way that it's you don't need to force him to do anything. He's kind of he likes to read and he's quite quick. And all these things. My wife says, "Oh, at least now we know we didn't make a mistake that we married." because before we didn't live together, so it could be it's a mistake, but just because
Now you know you get along.
uh,
Now you know you can be locked in together and don't and you're not gonna be at each other's throats. Yeah.
I have to say we got happier and happier. And also, I mean, with Misha, we didn't see each other live over 1 year, but the contact we have and the amount of time we call each other and we discuss things and chat about things and share what we do. I know now also a lot more about his family and what his daughters do and all that, because before that, you come there and in 1 hour meal or 2 hours, usually from 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock, when everyone is tired of the content, you try to tell a year's story. And
Sorry, yeah, to catch up. Yeah. But
it's
it's
not,
interesting when we talked the other day. Sorry to interrupt you, but just to prove the point, because I said, when did you see each other? You said, oh, just a couple of weeks ago, and it turned out you didn't see each other on Zoom for 2 weeks, but you actually did not see each other in real life for more than a year, right?
exactly. Uh,
Yeah, but it's interesting how this whole new way of communicating now almost substitutes the real life couple. We get used to it, so because human beings are very adaptable animals, and now we think, oh yeah, I'm seeing, oh, I just saw him, I just talked to him. But it's interesting how it this whole thing, and hopefully we'll come out of it wiser and maybe a little bit more also appreciative of what we have, because I think that now that you've done quite a lot live concerts and with the audience, Sasha, yeah. So you were, because I followed some of your concerts in Bulgaria before they closed down. I mean, you had audience there.
Yeah, I was quite lucky to catch couple of windows in other countries with 30%, with 50% in Moscow, with 30% in Sofia. Before that, in Finland, also with some restrictions, but also with the audience. Yesterday, I did in Lviv a concert without audience.
Uh-huh.
I
That was
mean,
just streaming. I
just
see.
streaming. Yeah, I now I start to think that doesn't matter how long this pandemic will be like this cloud above us. We should not get disappointed or whatsoever. As long there is the contact, as long there's players, as long there's ensembles and all that, and all these master classes online, I find it's a great thing. For example, with Misha, we have given master classes. We did Zemtsov master class for viola, where we also could watch each other lessons. We could never do this before,
Or
couldn't even think about doing this before, because when you do a real master class in 5 days, you are always busy and see each other for half an hour drink or lunch.
yeah.
But here you could spread your schedule so that once you can see how your brother
What
is
the other is doing. Yeah, exactly. We could see the other people masterclass when it's recorded already, at your leisure, in the middle of the night or early in the morning, whenever, when you want to see something specific. Speaking of viola, some of your colleagues and friends of NAS violas, they wanted to know, now I'm on the 7 violas, what instruments, what's the equipment, what instruments do you play? So let's start with Misha, then we'll go Sasha, and then you tell me about the others, what they playing, what makers, whether it's contemporary violas or old violas. So Misha, you start.
So yeah, I had a long story of the instruments since Mexico. I started with the Mexican viola of 2,000 Mexican pesos. It was I don't know what it was made of, but I mean I was working on this instrument. Little by little I was getting different instruments. I never had extremely expensive instruments, but the last 10 years I've played on a viola of Dutch maker Daniel Royer from Amsterdam.
Right.
And
Okay.
he made this viola for me. I think 2011 he made this viola for me, and I was extremely happy with this instrument. Most of the all of the YouTube videos which there are made on this viola. And then I thought that I would stay with this instrument for the rest of my life. But then I got a call from our teacher, Michael Kugel, and he told me I must come to his city to Hasselt because there is a phenomenal viola which I must have. And I was like, goodness, again a new viola. Okay, so I went there, and indeed, when I tried this instrument, I understand what you mean. It was a Gaetano Pareschi. It's a modern Italian instrument from 1950 from Ferrara. And the last videos like this last Rose of Summer, which I put on YouTube,
That was
it
played on
was
this, which is quite.
already made on this Pareschi viola. So I'm really happy about that.
That's extraordinary. I mean, for you also to play the last rose of summer on the viola. I mean, it's hard enough. It's so interesting now how times change. Just making a little detour to that particular piece because I grew up, of course, with my father's recording of the last rose of summer.
Yes, we know this.
Quite phenomenal. And at his time, there was, I think he was the only one on that of that generation that actually could play it.
Sasha also played this piece.
But now, sitting in the jury, I hear sometimes, very young, very young people, contestants, and they have no problem getting through the technical sides. I mean, they play all of those and pizzicato left hand and harmonics and everything. And now you guys on the viola, that is really because it's that much harder. It's that much harder, but it's fantastic how much the technical level. So Sash, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, of course, it all comes from Mikhail Kugel, with whom we both studied. Actually, not only we both, but almost all the seven violists. I think 5 out of 7 violists of the Zemtsov family studied with Mikhail Kugel, and I think he does totally right thing. He slightly arranges the violin pieces, making some things more in the viola style, and then there's still freedom. I mean, if you want, you can do the original violin version. If you don't have this kind of stretches, you just play slightly different intervals. Sixth replace, 10th replace sixth, and all that. But he did of course this fantastic thing, because there's this huge gap in the repertoire for viola, that absence of virtuoso music. There's not so many violists who wrote, with the exception of Maris Vio Herman. That's it. We don't have, and they were all just concert studies. That's it. We don't have this kind of Vitan, Vinyavsky, all that stuff which violinists can.
Not even Primrose wrote anything. Yeah, even though he was such a fantastic violist.
He just arranged. He arranged Paganini for viola. He kind of did the similar thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and regarding the instruments, I mean, I also went to a couple of Russian instruments. Actually, LPO job I won on a Russian instrument. Now I can reveal it after so many years I left, because I actually lied to a lot of people that it's unknown maker, old unknown maker, but it was actually very, very known, made in 1980s, Smirnov. But
yeah, but they bought it because it sounded good in your hands. That's the whole thing.
And I have now, of course, I understand that let's say 30% of time of practicing was dedicated to make this wood sound better. But he was still talented. I remember when I first brought it in Hamburg to the maker, he took it like this, and he looked at the pegs and said, "And the pegs are from Caucasus." Because he couldn't believe someone. But the viola sounded good, and then I went to other couple instruments. Last 5 years, I play borrowed instruments. It's because of a very close friend of mine, and he was violinist. Now he deals with instrument. He just gives me one time to time the instruments to play for a long time. I played the Villom of his for quite a while, and then I play. Now I play Pietro Gaggini. It's a modern Italian, very beautiful, really beautiful, kind of a pop. In general, I mean, because this question comes from violists, I believe that modern viola making is is a replacement for old, because the old is so limited. I played also half a year Gaspar de Salo, 44 and half. Yeah, it was very, very, very tricky. It's like this. Yeah, so the
Enormous.
problem is to get the first position when you have to stretch the hand in the first position. Yeah, but incredible sound. But of course, if you play
Impractical.
more
Impractical.
advanced, it's not suitable for Bartok concerto, let's say, yeah, where you have to go over all the instruments. So, and the modern instruments are there. There's, I think the modern viola making is in front of violin making because I don't
Yeah.
see so many good violins as so good violists. And
Not so many anyway. Yeah. Because Stradivari made how many violas?
well,
Made
12.
12. For
And we have now, and
1,200 violins probably, that he made, and only 12. So that's, one to 100. So and the others they did not, except Gaspar de Salo. But as you said,
of course, for me, if we speak about old violas, it's much more Brescia than Cremona,
yeah,
because after perfection of Stradivari, this proportion it's not suitable for viola. The Stradivari's measurement, and Stradivari made violas very, very similar measurement, just enlarged, like a violin. That's
yeah.
why Stradivari violas will be never the thing of the heart of violist as Gaspar de Salo.
That's probably because they have a different sonority completely. Yeah.
But
Interesting.
they are of course huge and they are difficult to play unless as some such a happy coincidence happens like with Amichai Grosh where the instrument is just kind of perfect. I think it's still cut down, but not much. But it's really kind of a perfect Gaspar de Salo viola.
That's part of it. There's a question very relevant to what you were just saying. But this comes from Greensboro, North Carolina, because I know my friend was asking it. Custom-made instruments by modern luthiers a top choice for virtuoso level musicians, or are original vintage instruments always superior? I think you've answered that, yeah, in some ways. But maybe Misha wants to elaborate on that.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, custom-made instruments are custom-made instruments by modern luthiers a top choice for virtuoso level musicians, or original vintage instruments always superior?
Yeah, um, in that sense, this collaboration with Daniel Royer was very interesting because I got first an instrument by him from a national foundation, the Dutch National Music Instrument Foundation, and I liked very much this instrument, and therefore I went to meet him. And from that moment, he started, I think, making just violas because so many people were interested in his instruments. I think he made like 20 instruments, which many of our students, our acquaintances, everybody who have seen my instrument, they got immediately interested about that, and they you see, and he was experimenting a lot, and we were talking a lot also about what is important, about, for example, about the importance of being comfortable, the neck, that it must be not too thick, this kind of stuff, importance of the not to have too big обечайки, how to say this,
Yeah. The sides of the violin.
the side of the viola that must not be too big, because for us to play virtuoso repertory, if it is just 2 millimeters bigger than it must be on this side, you always have sort of obstacles, so here sort of find out the best patron for that, and yeah, so in this sense, I think this is very interesting, a collaboration with a really good maker who can listen to you and who can experiment, you see.
Yeah. Also, with modern instruments, there is for kind of, let's say, for every taste, because now in Europe, not only Germany, France, but there is in so many countries now good makers. Sometimes you meet there were a couple of Polish very good makers, yeah, Swiss, I met few very good makers. Dutch, yeah. So and you can go on, and all of them are interested in the viola making because there is there's shortage of good violas,
It's
and
great.
if you aim for this kind of vintage instrument, you get something, and then it's too small, too big, not your kind of sound, not this or not
Yeah.
that. So it's not like violin, because violin at least there is a
Has a model which always has more or less the same measurements.
exactly.
Viola could vary. It could be really just a little bigger than violin, or could be as you described, 44. That's really huge. Gaspar de Salo. I've seen them and I've played with Gerard Cosset. There's this
Yeah.
enormous,
Yeah.
enormous viola, or Valles Libertine. You have that wonderful Maggini viola. I don't know whether you saw. No,
Yeah.
you never did because he passed away in 2002.
Maggini
Anyway,
is fantastic viola maker.
extraordinary sound. But there's such differences between in sizes, and therefore, I think it's interesting that it just reminds me of several situations. But I remember when I got finally, many years ago in '83, I got my Strat, and I've been playing it ever since. Except I do have now a superior sounding copy, and most people cannot tell. I fooled a lot of my colleagues, very, very distinguished people who sat on the jury with me in Montreal. There was Pierre Amoyal, Pavel Vernikov, Boris Kushner, and so forth, Pam Frank, and everything. And then they heard me play not just a little diddly, but the Goldberg variation. So they were there on stage, listening to me for an hour. And then we did also a couple of encores with the things. And then, of course, they come in. Oh, of course, that's your famous Reifenberg, 1717. I said, yeah, well, look at this. I mean, it does look pretty terrific, but except I hate to disappoint you, it was made in 2018.
Wow.
There was this big shock. I mean, nobody knew. And
How we say in Russia, Dima? Не имей амати, а умей играть. How you would translate this?
Yeah, well, it's not important that you have an amati, you have to know how to play it. And I remember when I met one of the times when I saw not only perform, but when I would see Rostropovich. He was, of course, this great mind and full of jokes and interesting. He said, steak, old man. He would always, old man, what do you play on? I said, well, now I just got myself straight. I said, that's not good. He said, well, I said, why, Mstislav Leopoldovich? He said, when I used to play Storioni, for years and years I played. So they would ask in the orchestra, they would ask, what are you playing? He said, Storioni. Oh, what a great cellist. Now I play this Strad, and they would say, what do you play? I said, Stradivari. Really? So he said it has the opposite effect. He said, if you say Stradivari, of course it plays by itself. We have another comment here. I experienced a lot of Sasha's concerts as conductor live, and even had the pleasure to be his soloist with Lviv Orchestra, but never asked him when and why he decided to start conducting. That's a very good question. Thank you, Maria. So, Sash, I will ask both of you what is it was on the list. What makes a great instrumentalist want to become a conductor? What was your motive, Sasha? Since the question for you first, and then I'll ask Misha because he does also conducting.
Actually, with your question, you just said the title of my master work of conducting, which I am doing now. So this
Yeah.
is another thing which I managed during this pandemic. I managed to I will manage in 2 weeks to complete my studies. And so I already did my exam conducting, but it which was stream actually from Moscow, so they just looked at it.
I see.
But the thing is exactly this question, which is so interesting for me. I think I had two reasons. One, of course, we people discovered now, and the scientists discovered this mirror neurons. You know, if you look at something and you like it, you can't help yourself. You start it. And as a violist, I sit, of course, in front of conductor, and all these amazing people which conducted LPO, they just gave this kind of an example how music is made, and of course maybe the absence of too much technical language, you know, that there is so much inspiration and all that, that moved me very much. Another thing maybe was also the orchestral smoking room, because people say, you know, before that there used to be smoking room, and people used to you know, conductors, it's so easy. And that also kind of teased me, because I wanted to try whether it's really so easy, or
Yeah. Or maybe they were wrong about that.
yeah, they were very wrong about that, of course. But it, as easy as it looks, it's actually such an incredible profession, very inspiring profession for an instrumentalist who we you know, we are crazy about this touch. And here we touch the instrument, and it sounds certain way, and suddenly you have this kind of a wireless touch.
Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi, musical Wi-Fi, yeah.
And it's just wireless to people, and it's a kind of, it's a little bit mystic, no, it's a little bit like,
Absolutely.
you know that. But there was never like one day I woke up and I thought I want to be conductor. It was never like this. There was this couple of things, you know, the smoking room, the great conductors, and this thing, you know, like what would it feel if between me and the instrument, and the people are the instrument, it's not me playing, but there is this kind of thing that you have to show with the hands to create kind of an atmosphere. It's a little bit mystic work.
There's definitely that. Misha, I'll let you say it, and then I'll tell you my idea behind the conducting, which is not dissimilar, but it has a specific point. Mish, you go ahead.
Yes, I still remember Sasha started earlier than me with the conducting,
Yeah.
and I still remember how he showed me a video from a master class of some conducting teacher in London. Mayer maybe was his last.
Matters. That what was in 2007. That was my first ever conducting master class. I just wanted to go in front of the orchestra and conduct something.
An experience, something. Yeah.
So, and then it was Second Symphony by Sibelius. I remember it until now. And then when I've seen this video, I actually understood at this moment which direction Sasha is going to go, because there was he was still just starting. He was very, of course, completely unexperienced, but there was a certain thing which I could recognize, you know, like sort of some magnetic field, which is extremely important, the most important thing in the conductor. So in my case, I never thought about being a conductor. Of course, I played for 23 years in the orchestra. I have seen so many conductors, and I've also been a member of artistic committee of the Hague Orchestra, of a residency orchestra, for 7 years, and my task was scouting of conductors, going to the concerts and finding new names, etc. So it was a very interesting work, but it didn't have any connection with why did I start conducting, because there is a school in Rotterdam, Hellendaal Music Institute. It was the first place where Julia started, my wife, started teaching in Holland. And in this school there was an orchestra, Concerto Grosso. There were youngsters from between 13 and 18 years old, more or less, and their conductor left, and this orchestra was like a like presentation, like visit card of the school, and they were very worried about that. And Julia told me, wouldn't you like to try to work with these kids? I thought, should I? Okay, so we spoke with the director, and she said, okay, just try that. And I started working with these youngsters. It was a string orchestra. and I liked it very much, and they also seemed to be being happy. And but the bad thing was that I had to conduct on a concert, and I made a video of myself conducting, and it looked so much worse than all the conductors which were considered bad in all the orchestras, you know. So if I was a violinist, I would just lead from the first chair. But being violist, it's a little bit strange. So I thought, okay, some friends told me, don't worry, you just go take 3-4 lessons and it will be all right. So I went. I remember I had to conduct polka pizzicata.
Oh yeah.
So I went to amazing, fantastic musician and conductor Lev Marquis, who lives in The Hague as well. And I asked him how to conduct this polka because I had no idea those fermatas and pauses. So he explained me. That was my first conducting lesson. And that's the thing, when you start learning conducting, your first stage is with every lesson you understand how bad you are doing this, you know. And even conducting children, still you go on stage and you must do something which somehow must be similar to something decent. And like this, I went more and more asking for the lessons for different people, and finally I understood that I need to study it properly. And then on a festival in Switzerland, I played with the National Orchestra of Lithuania as a soloist, and also I met their chief conductor Juozas Domarkas, who was for 50 years chief conductor in this orchestra. He is maybe the longest chief conductor in the history. And he was also teaching in the National Academy of Lithuania in Vilnius. So I started going with him first as a private student, and after 2 years I entered the masters in the school, and I finished the masters in symphonic and operatic conducting. But still, I mean, I have my diploma, but it doesn't mean anything. You never
enter. You're on the podium. You cannot just wave your diploma and say that.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. But of course, when I started learning conducting, actually I figured out, but all my experience watching conductors when I was in the orchestra, I didn't have a clue. When you start really learning the techniques, you start understanding how the thing works, and you just you could say I like working with conductor or not, but all these technicalities, if you don't really study it properly, you have no clue about that.
It's a body language, and it's also a technique. It's interesting because for me, of course, having played with so many conductors, much more as a soloist, of course, than in the orchestra, but still, when you start, it's such euphoria. You think you're conducting, and especially, I started with NAS, what became orchestra that became NAS. Phenomenal. So I had a Stradivari to start with before I knew how to play it. So the sound was phenomenal. I mean, because everybody was just so good. And of course, you think you're a conductor. No, that's a big illusion, of course. And so many young conductors like myself at that time, we think that we conduct. No, the real conductors, I believe, you become only when, in my opinion, just as an instrumentalist of a high order. Whatever we talked about instruments before, the reason I could fool people whether I play the Strad or I play a modern instrument is because I have my own sound, which is recognizable for people who know me, and I'm able to get that sound even from rather poor piece of wood, not well, but my sound is just like my mother, who can make an upright piano sing. How does she do it? It's a miracle, but she does have her own sound. And I believe that the really great conductors, they bring, that's where the mystery is. How do they do it? They bring, just by being there, they already emanate a certain sound. You begin to play in the different, musicians don't necessarily even know how it happens, but they bring their own sound. And for me, the biggest example in Art of Conducting, there's a very good film many years ago. I'm sure you've seen it. Not the Bernstein, who of course is quite fantastic, or Karajan, or the others, but Sitkovetsky, who conducts BBC Symphony. The orchestra who couldn't be further away in its sound from Philadelphia. But for him, they sound just like Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And therefore, he was not the most modest man, but he was a very capable man, obviously. And when somebody asked him, said, "Oh, but what about Philadelphia sound?" I said, "Philadelphia sound? It's me," he said. And he was right. Whatever orchestra he conducted, they had that phenomenal Philadelphia sound. So that gave me an idea that why am I doing that? One of the biggest desires that I had, ambitions, if you want, artistically, is to be able to bring the sound that is mine. That is only, whether you like it or not, that's another question. But as long as I can, within first rehearsal, as you get all better, it happens sooner, or a number of rehearsals, if I get my kind of sound from whatever orchestra I'm conducting, then in my opinion, then you're becoming a real conductor. Before that, you can have fantastic technique, you can have this and that, the note from memory, this and that. But if you don't actually change the sound of the orchestra, I think there is a big difference there. Speaking of the sound, we have a number of things that we need just to touch on, because we've talked about the instruments a lot. But I believe that bows are just as important. So there's a question to you both about the bows. Do you think the bows are important for playing, and what kind of bows or bow makers that you could mention? Let's just mention a few. Go ahead.
Again, for me, it's not a kind of a fame of the bow. I have one very fine Lamy bow. It's really very, very nice and all that. But I play more often a modern bow by Roy Quaid, a Canadian maker. And so it's a question about quality. Of course, if someone didn't put enough time in the bow making and doesn't understand so much about the relations of the weight and all that, of course this bow cannot be good. I know that a lot of students have to play with some fabric bow. It's unfortunately, but of course with some help from the right hand, it can be done also. So never give up. There's also this kind of, sometimes I feel between students there starts this kind of sickness. They just put bow. Maybe later, like first think when we start to do good things with right hand, that's already quite good. And as you say, that so that the player can bring his sound, and that's what we as players should be interested in. This is my view on all the instrumentarium. There's some people like hair spread out, some might like more hair, someone thicker on one side more, and this, and I tried all of those. I cannot say there's one which is perfect. One does one thing better and the other thing better, and then you ask your right hand what where it needs more help, and that is maybe the people think on viola very often. Oh, heavy bow is great. Yeah, for some thing is great, but for some other thing is not. So.
That's interesting. Misha, anything different as far as bows?
Yeah, I really like trying different bows, and it's a little bit, it's a endless quest for me. So I'm all the time trying different bows, and I always have 4 bows in my case, and I try. I think also it's good to know also for the students that I have a strong opinion that from every bow we'll learn something, and then sometimes I see that I can help my students to manage a certain bow stroke. For example, if it doesn't work with one bow, you try several bows. One of those bows sort of does it better, So there's this interesting thing, and now, for example, I bought a very nice Schmidt bow. This is modern bow, which Daniel, I borrowed it from Daniel Raiskin, who was a phenomenal viola soloist, but he is now conductor for many years.
Yeah.
So, and then he went to Schmidt himself. He's very careful and serious person. So he went to Schmidt and he told him exactly how this bow has to be.
And the way.
And there's this fantastic bow. I use it in the string quartet, and it articulates really phenomenal. And for solo playing, I have a couple of French bows, like not too expensive ones, Morizot or Bazin, and a couple of German bows as well.
That's great. Well, having so many violas in the family, you have to have a lot. Now, you've mentioned, of course, your students, and both of you are extremely active and committed teachers. So there is a question here: what does teaching mean to you both? So how does it work? Because I never taught as much as I actually have taught in the last year, because now I give a lot more, every week I give several lessons to certain students and to some colleagues. If they ask me, it's a different, but I'm not a professional teacher, so to speak. You've been professional teachers in since many years, and Sasha now pretty much half of Europe you teach in. You taught in Lausanne. You left LPO after 10 years, and then you taught in Lausanne, right? And then in Vienna, and now in Cologne. So you have, normally, you said, Mish, you said you have 26. And Sasha, how many students you have?
I have actually less students than Misha. In both conservatories, Köln and Lausanne, it's about 19.
19. That's a lot. That's plenty. So you've always said, so what, how can you answer a question? What does teaching mean to you both?
For me, it's a very easy question, because, when I was in the orchestra, first the relationship to the orchestra was, I have to just get the level and pass the trial and be at the level of my colleagues. Then you feel you gain the experience and you are kind of one of them and you are part of it, and you are doing something good for it. For the orchestra. Orchestra does something good for you, you do something good for it also. And then you see the newcomers to the orchestra, which are having a lot of gaps and having a lot of disappointments after auditions. That moved me to teaching. I left LPO not for conducting straight away. Conducting was still just a very much beginning. Yeah, it was for the teaching.
The teaching, yeah.
Just I thought, what is better, if I play until 65 in LPO, or I bring up 100, hopefully 300 violists who will play in orchestras of that level. Of course, as a life mission, the second choice is much better, because I had my pleasure for 10 years. They also deserve. And very often, there's really talented people instrumentally just are victims of disinformation, because they don't know how to prepare orchestral repertoire, and or how orchestral musicians hear and click, you know. So what when they orchestral musician listens viola lines, but in his mind sounds all others, and this is what doesn't happen with the student. That's why they play sometimes unrhythmic or unlogical phrasing and wrong accents, and but it's not because they are wrong, just because their mind is not tuned into this kind of orchestral. So this kind of audition preparation and giving the students the some information which will bring them to professional, because once you got into professional group, whether it's a quartet ensemble, of course for me orchestra was amazing. Whatever, whatever orchestra. I loved commercial opera as much I loved London Philharmonic. I can't say Philharmonic orchestra was better or worse or whatsoever. Also, in London Philharmonic we played in the summer Glyndebourne, this beautiful opera festival. So that was the reason, and this still stays like this. The aim for my students is to make them, that they are professional, not that they play this piece well, they have to play many pieces well, and they have to sight read well, and they have to learn the music quickly, and so do so many things well. But main thing is to give them this kick, that they start professional work. And a lot of my students start to work during studies, and I'm very proud of it. Sometimes I have problems from the directors; they say they don't go to lessons, but I have my own opinion. I think master student should start at least practicum from the first year. And in the second year, it's better that he gets the job, because when he gets the diploma and he still doesn't have experience with auditions, that's a bit too late.
Absolutely. I wish, more violin teachers would be listening and having the same sort of philosophy, because it is most important to equip, to give your student sort of the survival tools, which will, or to establish certain principles for his or her life, so they could improve in whatever situations they would find themselves continuously, but also have a job that they could support themselves. Because so many, unfortunately, brilliant teachers, as violin teachers I'm talking about, they just concentrate on solo repertoire. But how many of their students realistically can sustain a solo career? And then they come out and they never really did any orchestral experience. They don't know orchestral repertoire. They don't know chamber music. They don't know, and they're completely naked. They're unprepared for so-called the street life, for the real life. They've been in that cocoon among their friends. They all going from one competition to the next competition and this and that. And at the end, what? You wanted to comment on that, Sasha? Yeah.
No, but Dima, from your own and experience of all your distinguished friends and colleagues, that there is nobody just soloist.
No,
Every
nothing.
soloist plays chamber music, and if he's good soloist, he plays chamber music wonderfully. And some of string players, orchestral instrument players have orchestral experience. I think it always helps. I think for a violinist to play a couple of years in orchestra only can help. Of course, there's this kind of wrong opinion that the form goes down and all that. Of course, if you stop
Oh,
practicing, the form goes down. But if you want to keep the form, it's only But now this thing changes between the young generation, because people want to play in famous orchestras. They want to know people they watched on on television, on streams,
yeah.
in big halls and all that. They want to
To
belong.
have the access to them,
Exactly.
to have ability to meet them and talk to them.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because this is so additionally so important to what we study at the conservatory. The conservatory, I think, is exactly just this kick to that they become colleagues with good people. That's for me most important thing.
Uh,
And that's, I hope I answered.
no, I think you answered very well, and I will go to Misha if he has something to add to that. What Sasha and we were talking about, to answer that question.
Yes, actually, in our family has a long tradition of teaching and being teachers. Our both parents were teaching all their lives, and we both started our studies when we were kids. We started with our mother, who was actually very good teacher for viola. She was a viola player, but she had also violin students. And the interesting thing is, now I'm 51, and I'm just thinking sometimes about all the experiences I got from all my teachers, starting with my mother, and then of course the Galina Adinets, which I was in the conservatory. In Mexico, I studied with the father of my wife, Boris Dinerstein. Is a phenomenal pedagogue and a coach. He actually prepared me for all the auditions in Mexico and also in Europe, because the Stavanger audition I won still before I came to Michael Kugel.
Really?
Yes, yeah. And then of course for example, I said in Mexico, I was co-principal there. Finally, after this Tsinsadze audition, I had to make 5 auditions more with normal repertory to get my place in the orchestra. But then there was also Mikhail Talpyga, one of the most famous Soviet viola players, who came there, and he was a principal there. And that was I was sitting next to him for 7 years, and that was absolutely phenomenal school of being a principal, and you know. And then of course Michael Kugel, that was just another dimension, and so I'm thinking about all these experiences and yeah, about the joy which I have having possibility to give this all this experience to new generation, you know. And many times I'm for example, I tell something to some student, and I'm not sure anymore where did I get this idea, from which of my teachers, or maybe, you know, where did I hear. So this melting of all this fusion of all your experiences, this is a phenomenal thing. But of course, teaching is I'm absolutely sure it's not one-way road. So we learn from our students sometimes more than they learn from us, you know. And I think it is just an amazing creative laboratory, you know, with all these different people, different students with different characters, possibilities, problems or advantages, you know. So I'm extremely excited. I think there is also at certain moment, at certain age, or a certain stage in your life, this is the extremely important way of development, of self-development, and helping develop to the other people. So
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think it,
Misha brought me to add some things, because, for example, the only same teacher we had with Misha was Mikhail Kugel, who of course did influence me a lot and develop my technique and did make me free and all that. But I had in total, I think it's I had 4 viola teachers. So Elena Ozon, who was my first viola teacher, fantastic quartet player, and already gave me so much. She was introducing things. I had, for example, to go and listen every concert of Borodin Quartet. That was a must in our class.
yes.
I became big fan of quartet repertoire. Yeah, and then the second teacher was Marius Nikitiano, who was orchestral principal in MDR.
I knew him very well. Yeah, it was wonderful. Yeah, I did a tour with him. Yeah.
He was he was incredibly kind guy, and was friends with everyone and would never say a bad word and all that. Very sweet. He sounded fantastic. He had fantastic old viola, and very generous and very nice. He would give 4 hours lesson and all that. So, and then was Mikhail Kugel, who was kind of the injection of something totally new. But then when I was already in London Philharmonic, I thought, like, I need some updates, something stylistic, something. So, and I thought that one of my favorite players was always Tabea Zimmermann. So I did a postgraduate program, künstlerisch weiterbildendes Studium at the Hans Eisler in Berlin with her.
I didn't know you did that. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and that was totally something different. And now when I am teaching my students, especially for example with Russians who have very little information about the Western playing and Western style,
Yeah.
and this kind of you know uh, thing is very much appreciated here in the Western orchestras. Much more articulated, much more pronounced playing, a playing which suits to the winds also. So that
Yeah.
so the sound is very produced very. in a very pronounced way, spoken way. Yeah, so it's a
Articulated, very articulated. Yeah, yeah.
so that Tabea changed a lot, and she we still are in an incredible relationship. She played with me once as a soloist. I'm so proud of that. With
Oh,
Molten concerto, I conducted for her in Sofia Philharmonic, and then we played an encore. That was actually first time we played something together,
yeah,
and
there's an encore. Oh, wonderful.
then all this kind of summer, if you only do it in orchestra for the job, you are too egoistic. You have to share it with the young generation, and you have. I already started to teach at Guildhall when I was during the time in of London Philharmonic. I did mainly kind of uh, audition preparation, and when I started with the bachelors, that was the challenge. When you get a bachelor with a lot of technical gaps, then you understand that teaching is not just audition preparation, and this is still challenging for me. This is something what I,
Yeah.
you know,
Just before we go, because I think it would be very important for the young ones also to know how do you sustain their spirit now, because for this pandemic, obviously you both went through it and became even, it had a lot of positive things for you somehow because of the connection with the family to be able to do what you described. But for a lot of young people, it's been a very devastating time. The ones who've been working before lost all their work, and the ones who were hoping to get work later on, now it's a big unknown. Now, I think for you two who have an extraordinary, not only backstory, which of course we've touched upon, but also you have a wonderful source of uh, joie de vivre. Yeah, so you have a life source. So, like Misha said, he has this, non-stop pressure cooker, and Sasha, in a different way, also is intensely, ambitious in the good way, artistically ambitious, which also reveals your drive, your inner drive. How can you uh, give it to the how could you instill some optimism and give them certain tools not to get depressed, not to change their profession, or for something else? Maybe they should, some of them, maybe they should to earn some money, because it's very difficult unless you have an orchestral job that pays. And we know out of all the London orchestras, only two of them have actually salary. So if it's at the top of the professions like this, and we've known about famous orchestras not paying and so forth. So what would be your words of encouragement, and what do you tell your own students or your colleagues who have a harder time? Because it's very difficult to as the saying in Russian says, "Сытый голодного не понимает." Yeah, the one who is not hungry will never know what hungry feels like. So, if you given that kind of a question, what would be uh, your words of encouragement?
So, if I may, it
Of
is of
course.
course when we spoke about pandemics. That's the first thing I said, because I realized very well that if for me it was really actually great experience to be able to have all this free time and so on. For many people, it was very hard time, and just basically to surviving, financially surviving economically. And I know all this also from my students. Many of my students who were actually had gigs and stuff, and so suddenly they didn't have work, and even many students were working in restaurants and hotels, having just a little earning little money, and they lost these opportunities as well. So this is, of course, hard period for many people, and also for the young people who who are just, for example, starting their careers and which is going very well, and suddenly it's a complete stop, and they don't have so much um, baggage, let's say, so the resources and so on. I think in that sense, and also what I wanted to say about teaching the students, we must realize one thing, that when we are teaching somebody to play viola or to do anything else, I don't know, to ski or to make artificial intelligence, I think the most important thing that we must be aware that we are dealing with the human beings, and that we are responsible for those people. They can do different things, but still they must be, they must develop themselves as human beings, and this is extremely important also in the hard situation. How you, what is your how you perceive the world, you know, how do you perceive the life, and how do you deal with a difficult or happy situation. You know, this happy situation can be also such a actually challenge for somebody not to get crazy. You know, we have seen so many talented people then who, when they got careers, they didn't manage dealing with that. You know, they probably maybe became less good musicians, but very problematic human beings. Unfortunately, we have seen a lot of this coming. So I think the important thing is that we always see anything which happens in our life as opportunity, and not as how to say it, as a disaster. You know, any disaster
As a
is
punishment,
was as well an opportunity. You know, and for young people, it's difficult to understand this. When I was young, I probably also couldn't understand this very well. But I did have moments when I didn't have money to eat, to buy food, or to buy food for my family. You know, that we did have several moments like this in our life. But looking back to those moments, it was actually a great experience. You learn from difficulties more than you would learn probably from happy times. You know. So the most important thing, we must just realize, everybody, that the difficulties are making us stronger if we really meet them with the right spirit and right way.
That's
Yeah.
very good. And Sasha?
Now I see that for many students and many actually people of this young generation, maybe this was the first hardship in their life at all. This
Right.
consistent
That's right.
change, because this generation is
They're
growing up.
not prepared for it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
they're growing up with freedom. Freedom means uh, they can do whatever they want, so they actually go very much by little short terms wishes. So they, for them, I think it's very difficult, because they, most of them don't see this long term good, which also, for me, when it was the stop, also it was kind of a shock. But now I see so many good things. I have to say that I have seen a lot of positive also in my students. I mean, first, this thing with recordings, that they all have to record themselves to present for auditions and all that. This is a work which they do, in which develops the level of their practicing. Really, with
Absolutely.
some it rockets. It rockets. Their ears refine. And I remember that I always bought, uh, for the last money, the newest machine which came out for recording, whether it was this tape or then the next, and then the mini disc, and then I have the graveyard at home of all these machines, because I bought every one which new came out,
Yeah.
because I wanted to hear myself. Always was my dream to go to the hall, to sit like this and listen how Sasha is playing. I
Yeah.
still couldn't manage to do that, but at least the recording helps. It gives you
Right.
some perspective. Yeah, this is one. Another thing, how I try to encourage my students also to say that this reset. which happened now. I mean, easily to say they have as many concerts now as famous musicians. Everyone is down to zero, or just, you know. So this after this reset, someone who spent this time productively, he will have more chances, and I'm sure about that. Also, there is not a big drama if someone changes profession. If he finds himself in a new profession, this is actually maybe the huge luck. And if music continues to be the love of his life, and he goes to concerts, or he will start also to write reviews and all the, I am big supporter of this. And I think main thing is to tell them, look, nothing should be drama. Of course, again, how you say сытый голодного не разумеет. Those who have, they
Yeah,
can't.
of course.
Who don't.
Yeah.
I try to understand. Of course, I sometimes imagine, yeah, let's say we started with the Stavanger story. If it would happen back then, and I am this, 18, 19 years old violist who practices and wants to get a job, and
Would
there is
not
no
be so
chance for.
easy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but there are chances. I mean,
It would,
during this.
it would be a different life story, because I've mentioned in previous talks that this is actually not the first time when I had such a long period of without concerts. This is, of course, it's been, they still continue to cancel. Just now, Switzerland canceled, Austria canceled of Salzburg master courses. We still have things canceled, but now I have some things that I'm really looking forward to, which will happen in 2 weeks, hopefully. But I had a period when I did not see the stage for a year and a half, and I was only 21, 22. That was just prior to my immigration to to the States, and I was already giving concerts because I started early, with competition. So of course, on one hand, you have the whole life in front of you, so you have this kind of anticipation of another life. Here we don't know how much our lives actually will be different. We already have all the difficulties of testing and the quarantine and this and that, the other. But I think as long as we have some kind of a return of concerts that you've been giving, Sasha, or you, Misha, and soon I will be hopefully in the same boat. I think it gives all of us a chance to reconnect for real, because as you said and you mentioned, we've never spent actually so much time communicating with each other. Misha and Sasha, you've been part of this. We made 15 videos, distant videos, and yes, from Seattle to Moscow. You've been very much part of it. That's a fantastic achievement. In normal situation, would not be possible. But of course, the difficult situation makes one think creatively and all that. So, but that's all the positive things. In terms of negative, I think if you really manage to turn your own drive, your pressure cooker, as Misha named his own situation, or your life ambition in a different form, so be it. And at that point, whichever life turns out to be, maybe it's we never know. It's nice to say, but it is historically true that after that horrendous, horrible Black Death epidemic in 14th century, there came Renaissance of 200 years. So let's hope that maybe it will be some kind of a renaissance of people connecting, wanted to connect, and wanted to give each other, and think that they're not alone. And it's life is not only about you being the center of attention, but it's about people that you love, your family, your friends, your colleagues, and people who wrote that wonderful music that we perform, and the ones that we perform it with. So thank you so much, the Zemtsov, the extraordinary Zemtsov brothers, the Zemtsov family. Thank you so much for joining me. we've gone, I think, the longest, but of course, there are two of you, they're here so far. But it's been wonderful. We've had wonderful comments, which I'm sure you could see later on YouTube. So please, next week, after which I will be taking a break because I'll be on the road and it's difficult to do it on the road. So we'll be doing some reruns. But don't forget to subscribe, which is free, to my YouTube channel, where you could see all of those videos that we talked about, that we've made with NAS, and many more of both Zemtsovs and everybody else. So I'll see you in a week, and thank you very much, Misha and Sasha, for a wonderful, wonderful hour and a half that we spent.
Thank you so much, Dima. It was fantastic opportunity.
Fantastic, real pleasure.
It was
Real
a
pleasure.
great time together.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.